Okay, you ready?
I guess.
How's your headspace now? We good?
No, not really.
What attracted you to the idea of remote viewing at first? How you got
I'll tell you, it's fine. We can talk about remote viewing the rest of the time. Be fine with me. I wanted to know how it worked. And I wanted to know how it worked so that I could maybe start to understand in what ways that we were wrong about reality. If I can learn more about this, learn how to do it, understand it, maybe I'll have a chance at maybe coming up with an idea of how it works. I wanted to take Paul Smith's class. I found him to be, at least to me anyway, he seemed like the best guy to learn from. All of his classes were in Utah. You know, he doesn't plan them years in advance. And so it would just be like, oh, hop on his website. Oh, there's one week after next. Well, I can't go to that one. All right, there's going to be one in January. Okay, well, that's not a good time for me to go to Utah for a week. I just couldn't get to any. When I was writing It From Us, I'd spoken to Paul a couple of times, and he had looked at my framework at the very beginning before I started getting into it. He was one of the people that I asked, hey, would you look at this and tell me if it sounds ridiculous or not? Paul has a PhD in consciousness studies. He was I think the third remote viewer for the Army. He'd been teaching it since late 1990s. And so I thought, well, here's somebody maybe open-minded enough to look at my framework. He wouldn't be categorically against it. He gave me some feedback on it. And then I was getting ready to send Paul a copy of the book, It From Us. He's mentioned in the book a couple of times. So I just asked him, hey, you got any classes coming up? He's like, yeah, I'm going to announce one pretty soon, you know. I'll email you. And he emailed me, and it was like 3 weeks later or something. I told my wife, you know, I've told you 4 or 5 times now that I think I'm going to go take this class, and it just hasn't worked out, but I'm going to this one. And she said, okay. 3 days into Paul Smith's remote viewing training, something pretty crazy happened. Do you want to hear about it? This is the story. I go out to Cedar City, Utah. Paul came and picked me up at the hotel, took me to class, and then it's class. Lectures and notes and essays, and like you'd expect out of real school, not out of remote viewing classes. This is not a shallow seminar about a weekend hobby. There were days that week that we were there 12 and 14 hours. I wasn't expecting anything out there aside from the training, but it's gorgeous. I mean gorgeous. You know, Zion National Park, just gorgeous. I did not expect southern Utah, just really breathtaking. Like, you know, Grand Canyon level scenery and Native American, you know, rock art and petroglyphs. And I expected desert, sand, and Mormons. They had all of those. There was a lot more. Things were going pretty much as planned. 3 students and then some assistants and people from some of Paul's more advanced classes were around doing things too. You know, this is a brush up, refresher, and then there's going to be these handful of things that I get a different view on, you know, as far as how Paul approaches and teaches remote viewing versus the other folks I learned from. I wasn't expecting anything too major beyond that. I really thought I'm just catching up so that I can do the next course here and really, really get back on track with what I'm trying to accomplish. Which, what I wanted to accomplish was, I wanted to become, or I want to become, expert level at it. As good as I am capable of being at it, I want to do that, just because I think that gives me the best chance of having the best understanding of it. We're ready to start doing some sessions. A couple days of lectures, and then we're going to start doing some sessions. So I did a session, and it was okay. I did it with, I think the first one was with Paul. And then the next session was with Angela.
My name is Angela Atkinson, Remote Viewing Instructional Services, which is Paul Smith's company. Always had this intuitive knowing since I was quite young that there are other aspects of consciousness and the ability to sense things that are beyond just what our left brain is able to deduce. Controlled remote viewing is a methodology, a specific set of protocols. The original form of remote viewing pioneered by Ingo Swann, Hal Puthoff, Russell Targ, adopted by the military and the CIA in the famed Stargate program. As an assistant, or as what we call a monitor in remote viewing, my role is to sit with a student 100% focused on everything that's going on with the student.
You know, it started out normal, take the coordinates, right? Ideogram, start describing. You get impressions about the target, and what they are for me is, does this seem interesting to me or not? Is this going to be interesting or not? The impression I was getting about this was that it was not going to be interesting. You know, right at the beginning, the first word that I wrote down was Moundy. And right away I thought, what a weird word to write down. And a lot of times you put a Y on the end of the word so that it isn't a noun, because a noun is naming, not describing. So that wasn't the weird part. The weird part was the word, Moundy. What, like a hill? Why wouldn't I say hilly? Why wouldn't I say hilly? Why wouldn't I say, you know, elevated or bulbous? Something impressive. I got a good enough vocabulary that Moundy seems a little weird, seems a little goofy. But I wrote it down, Moundy, noted that just to myself, that's weird. Kept going from there. I was like, okay, hard, rocky, brown, yellow, red, orange. I'm getting the impression that I'm describing a location that's like that, you know.
With Ryan's session, he initially was capturing a lot of really good data about the target. He was getting the impressions, the colors, kind of the shapes. It was a normal session. He's one of those rapid fire students who it's just like a gush of data comes out. And he said this word as a descriptor. He used this word Moundy. Now, as a monitor, Moundy is questionable as to whether that's an acceptable description. Adding a Y to the end of a noun doesn't necessarily make it, it can be an indication of attachment to it being a thing like a mound, right? But what he was seeing and what he was drawing, looked to me like it was this kind of shape. So I let it go, but more the reason that I let it go is something was happening to him. It's starting to get weird, right? There shouldn't be anything weird, rocky, right? Big, wide, open. And I started describing unusual things for what I usually pick up on at a target. When the cadence of information changes, a monitor needs to be on that quickly and not rush the session. Even in this situation, I didn't want to correct him and even say, I'm not sure about Moundy, Ryan, but I'm going to let that go because something was happening to him. She's like, I get the impression, though, that you're ready to start sketching. I'm like, I am ready to start sketching. And then I said, bigger than I thought. And she said, okay, well, start sketching then. What do you think I sketched? A mound. Mound. I'm just kind of letting my subconscious and the pen do the thing, and then the mound is hollow. And I went over here, I wrote like a hobbit hole. And she says, okay, describe the mound.
So I did, and I said, it's like concretey inside. I said, well, it's like the inside of a softball dugout at a softball field, or like a pillbox, like a World War I fortification. The Maginot Line, I think I wrote that down, Maginot Line, built into the hill, gun turrets and things.
And as the session progressed, he got more and more quiet. He was getting quite emotional, which is also not his normal, he's a pretty rational dude, but he doesn't often share an emotional timbre to a target for sure, or even other students in the class. I mean, he's really pretty under control. And what I was witnessing was not only him losing control, but surrendering control to what was happening to him. And I dare say use the word spiritual, but there was something that was happening in the field, in the room, that said that this was very, very significant to him.
All of a sudden, something was changing. My body temperature was like changing drastically. And I wrote, ancient. This place is old. Ancient. And then I started to get these mental images just kind of slowly coming together. But again, the mental images are like your imagination taking the data and turning it into something. Fires and caverns and shadows on the wall, like I wasn't seeing the people, but I was seeing the shadows like they were dancing around a fire. And the impression of headdresses, And I wrote down big magic. She said, big magic? I said, big medicine. And I wrote that down. And I started to get emotional, like, when you hit the point where you're like so emotional about something, like, okay, I know the crying's gonna come now. And so you start steeling yourself against that. The difference is, in this case, is I had no idea what the crying was about. When this normally happens to you, you have known about it the whole time. You were there at the beginning when something upset you, and then you were there in the middle when you were getting more upset, and then you were there at the point where you had to steel yourself against the tears, and so on. You knew what the cause was. And here I am, the same thing has happened to me, but it's like out of nowhere. I have no idea what the cause is.
This kind of visceral connection with the target, there is a term for it. It's called aesthetic impact.
Wide, rounded, deep, whoa, AI break, heart-stopping. And you get down here and that aperture opens up and you discover the Coney Island roller coaster, right? Heart-stopping.
And what that is when a student has an emotional, subjective reaction to the target. Let's just say that the target is a fire. Let's just say it's like a wildfire or something like that. If you're from California, for example, maybe your house was burned down by a fire, it may elicit almost a traumatic response to a wildfire. Another student may say, oh, that's just a campfire, that's really cool, let's go toast some marshmallows. So that's a difference in reaction, which is very subjective about the target.
And it flows through over a long period of time. But then when you get to that merge between stage 2 and stage 3, the indicator for that is the aperture opens up a lot wider. Okay? Whole lot more stuff comes through in a big burst. Okay? And the gateway indicator this happened is a particular aesthetic impact you have. You can have smaller ones, some of you have. You have smaller AIs as you go through stage 2, that happens. But when you merge from stage 2 into stage 3 and that grows, you have a more significant and relevant AI that occurs. I call it this is my name, it's not Ingo's, but there's an Ingo connection. I call it gatekeeper AI. What does that remind you guys of?
It can often happen when a student is tired. It can also happen at the end of a long day of session. So when we say the aperture is open, but it's almost like the resistance, the muscle of resistance is worn out. The left brain is just kind of tired of trying to be in charge.
The target it's a place. I was not tasked with remote viewing a history of a place or what might have happened at some point to some people at a place. It was just the place. You know, I think she knew enough about it that she was starting to put two and two together and what was happening. I couldn't do anything except for sit there and try to compose myself. Paul Smith, you know, the Army's Jedi master, is in the room next door to me. If he hears me bawling in the next room, he's probably going to come in and give me a hug. I'm like, you have to hold it together here, man. So I'm on the verge of tears for who knows why, not me. At that point, I do understand that this might have something to do with Native Americans, but that's all I can tell you. There might be a headdress involved, possibly a fire dance, big medicine and big magic, and rocks. But that's all I know. And I could not get composure. Now, Angela, a psychic, I was probably at a pretty safe place to fall apart. And that's what happened. I couldn't hold it together anymore. I started crying. She's like, can you stay with the target?
There's something going on, and my job is to not interfere and support as I can what's happening with the student, because oftentimes it can be highly emotional. They don't really most likely know what's happening to them.
And I wrote, my father's spirit still lives in this place. Which is a line from a Dave Matthews song called Don't Drink the Water. And by then I was not holding it together at all anymore. And she's like, I feel like you've had enough. I'm like, I've had enough. And ended the session, and it took me a few more minutes to even be able to say anything else. She didn't really know me that well, you know, by then. She's just, you know, this guy's been in class a couple of days. He's kind of funny, a little bit of a smart aleck. So I think what she was seeing was outside of what she was expecting to see out of me.
He can often make a joke out of things, or sometimes he'll talk to himself in a session and be kind of a little, you know, playing the clown. And that didn't happen with this one. It just told me, you know, that he wasn't playing this normal role of almost like there's a narrator who is narrating, and then Ryan will drop into, you know, actually being a remote viewer, and then he'll narrate what's happening, his observer self. There
was this thing that I felt like I needed to say. It violates my worldview. And talking to Paul about it later, it was even worse. Because Paul tells us at the beginning of class, all targets are at present. So when you describe the temperature, they go and they look up the temperature wherever that is to determine, were you right about that now? But I had to say it, and I had to get to a place, you know, as far as my composure, where I could say it. But finally I got there. She's like, okay, well, you know, what is it that you want to say about it? And I said, those people are still there. And I don't know why that means anything to me. It's ridiculous, obviously. But They are.
In controlled remote viewing, the traditional way of dealing with it is just a part of the process, right? You just trust the process. It's a step along the way. Sometimes I feel like viewing it as just a step in the process is reductionistic, and it minimizes the depth of experience that can happen to some students. In this case, Ryan, I would not have called that. Yes, it was aesthetic impact, but there was something else more mysterious going on.
Up to this point, I have not seen the target. I have not gotten the feedback. I do not know what it is or where, technically, but I do know what it is. And I'd written a few other things that describe the area. You could say I even understood maybe what part of the continent it was. We don't give targets away that somebody might get in training, so I'm not going to say where it was, but it was in North America, and it was a place that was, for a long time inhabited by indigenous peoples, Native North Americans, for a long time, thousands of years. Again, I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know the history of the place. I mean, I knew the history of America. You know, these people were treated unfairly. But this place and these people were treated particularly unfairly. Somewhat well-known series of events. They were relocated elsewhere. Who was left of them were relocated. That relocation has a history, and if you know anything about the history of America, then you already know the story. If not specifically, you know the gist of it. And I did too, before I ever saw anything concrete about the target.
As a viewer, when I've been doing sessions on my own, unmonitored, I have had a few sessions that I would hesitate to compare. I'm not inside of Ryan, but that rose to this level of it's almost like my soul had a memory of this target, if that makes sense. But it elicited emotions that rarely show up.
Every remote viewing session besides this one that I have ever done, there's that excitement. Did I describe the nuclear submarine that the Russians are building like Joe McMoneagle did? Or did I spend 30 minutes describing an elephant that turns out to be a bowl of plums? But none of those feelings were happening for me. I was frankly glad that it was over. Focused on gaining my composure before I had to go back out in front of all the other students, and I didn't want to go out there all puffy-faced and drippy-eyed and looking like a wimp. Angela showed me the feedback, and she's like, "You were on the signal there." I'm like, "Yeah, no kidding." I didn't need the pictures to tell me that.
And my role as a monitor is to not interfere when there's something that seems like it's happening that I may not be understanding or that really captures my attention. It tells me I actually need to sharpen my focus because something is going on with a student. And sometimes it's just simply that they've broken through to the next stage, that they have a more acute relationship with the signal. But sometimes it's much, much more. It's almost a phenomena that does not often happen, but sometimes has happened. I would say I can count it on one hand, where I feel like the student has connected with a target, not just saying that it's round and orange or tall, like gathering physical data about the target, but that there is some kind of a visceral connection to the target that tells me this is on a totally different level.
The people who had lived around this place, that was rocky and cavey and all that. And they had built up areas with mud bricks. So there were areas that had layers like that. They lived there. Almost everything that I said about it was accurate in the way that a brain does that. Kind of raw sensory data, and then your mind kind of turns it into things that are similar to what it is. I was not expecting remote viewing to result in something like this happening.
One target, I could just feel this lump in my throat rising and this sense of tears coming to the surface, and it just felt this sense of just awe, but it was matched with, like, I was gonna cry. And the target ended up being a church, just a quite famous church that's known for its art and it's known for, you know, its majesty, but also this just deep, deep sense of reverence and awe.
I was familiar with the term. It's called aesthetic impact. It's your emotional response to the target. And I'd had it happen before. But when it had happened before, it was, ooh, neat. Or, oh, I don't like that. You know, the thing you would expect to feel if you were there, not the thing you are feeling when you're not there. Couple that with the fact that I had no idea what it was. I wasn't starting from a place of knowing what it was and getting the history and then getting sad about it. It was the opposite of that. Rough impressions followed by just a rush of emotional data. And an aesthetic impact it's your response. The target doesn't have emotion, you do. So it's personal, it's what this thing is to you. I mean, yeah, I feel strongly about things like this, but I didn't expect this. I consider it to be positive. Just as a human being, I don't think there's anything wrong with having an emotional response to suffering of other people. Probably we could do with more of that going around, but I tried to get back to class as best I could after that, but smart-ass Ryan got pretty quiet the days after that. Taking my notes and studying, and glance over and there's Angela looking at me like, She's just, you know, a intuitive person. I didn't think I was going to do any personal growth from remote viewing. I was just trying to figure out what the fabric of reality is. Something simple.
I think in general, CRV can be used as a tool to find a missing person, find a lost wedding ring, kind of these very materialistic but also kind of transactional purposes. But there's another role that I feel like remote viewing in general plays, which is about the growth of us as humans and tapping into vastly underutilized potential of our psychic sensibilities, our ability to connect, blur boundaries with the world. And I think that when we experience that in remote viewing, it's really important to acknowledge the import of that and also view it as a sacred experience and a sacred journey to know the potential for our own power.
We took like a field trip, I think a day or two later, and I'm in the car with Paul. I think we were going to the Zion National Park. Paul's like, Angela told me more about what happened in there. You know, I'd like to hear if you want to talk about it. And I kept it pretty brief, you know, not trying to fall apart in the car in front of Paul Smith. He's like, well, just so you know, we do know that's something that can happen, but it's not like we try to do that to you. I said, no, I understand. He's like, you'll have this from time to time. I'm like, yeah, you know, I've had aesthetic impact before, but just not like that. He's like, all right, well, you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'll be fine.
It can happen in a lifetime when you find a teacher who exhibits all of the qualities or many of the qualities that it takes for you to learn. may not be the easy path, may not be, you know exactly where you're going, but you trust the teacher is going to guide you along the way. Paul Smith was that teacher for me. You know, he has a deep spiritual side to him. He's got a huge heart and is deeply compassionate for his students and the world, and has all the time to devote to his practice of passing on this legacy of controlled remote viewing. And the world and the remote viewing community is very, very lucky to have him to continue to offer his gifts and his energy.
It'll probably take me some time to really integrate this. It's not the thing that happened to the people. I mean, yes, that's awful. I wish we lived in a world where that kind of thing didn't still take place, and it does. But for me, it was about that could happen to you, or to me, from writing some numbers down and making a squiggle and writing down words on a piece of paper. All the while doing something that shouldn't even be physically possible in a universe as explained. And here, not only is all that possible, not only did I describe the damn thing, but now I'm dealing with emotions related to the thing that doesn't have a damn thing to do with me. I've never been anywhere near it, and I've never seen it, and I don't know what it is, and I don't know where it is, and I don't know who they are. Moundy. It was a strange word. Popped up out of nowhere during that session. First word that went down on the paper. And it took me a while to realize what it meant. And the location of the target, it was not where I'm from. This is where I'm from. And here, Native Americans buried their dead, or their important dead, in mounds. And I'm standing on one of them. This is a mound from what we now call the Hopewell culture, around 2,000 years before present. They lived in this area of Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky. It wasn't a tribe, it was many tribes. It starts down there, and it's difficult to make out now because it's a park. At the time that it was built, this was probably maintained, and it didn't have hiking paths through and around and over it. This is one of the few that remain. At one point, they think there might have been 10,000 of these mounds in Ohio, and now we've got under 200 of them. And some of them are on farms, and some of them are parks like this. There's a number of them in a national park. But this is one of those mounds. So when I'm doing that session and Moundy comes up, I didn't think about it right away. But later on in that session, Moundy started to make perfect sense, because my subconscious was essentially telling me in the language I understand. We're talking about Native Americans and sacred places. Later on in that session, I told Angela, Moundy makes total sense, and we went back and looked at my drawings, you know. I even said things like a hobbit hole. Another weird thing to say. Well, until you get through it, and then it starts to actually make a lot more sense. My subconscious saw what was happening at that target, or what had happened at that target, and immediately my mind starts to process that in ways that I can understand. You can't describe something that you'd have no familiarity with. We're kind of like constantly making metaphors with which to understand things, and that's what my mind was doing. It was crafting a metaphor for me. A rocky canyon and mounds don't really go together until you have the full picture. Once I did, this made total sense. I thought it was important to come here. I brought my son here a week ago and was showing him, you know, teaching him what this is, but now it's a bike trail. So this is Moundy, like a hobbit hole. So anyway, that's the Utah story.
Freddie put the cat aboard with a man in a balloon. He told the man to give him to the man who's in the moon. The balloon, it didn't rise, but crashed into the ground. 57 pieces of that man were all they found. Oh, but the cat came back the very next day. The cat came back, they thought he was a goner. But the cat came back, just wouldn't stay away. Freddie put him on a ship that was headed for Ceylon. Well, Taiwan, we're going to do our The ship was overloaded, more than 30,000 tons. 50 miles away from shore, that cargo ship went down. There wasn't any doubt of it, but everybody drowned. Except the cat came back the very next day. The cat came back, they thought he was a goner, but the cat came back, just wouldn't stay away. Freddie, let's see, gave him to a lady that was headed way out west. This is a awful verse here. He told her she could give him to the man that she loved best. But the train, it hit a curve and then it jumped a rail. There wasn't anyone left behind to tell that sorry tale. Oh, but the cat came back the very next day. The cat came back, they thought he was a goner, but no, the cat came back, he just wouldn't stay away. Now I gotta remember how this last one goes. The atom bomb fell just the other day. The H-bomb fell in the very same way. First went London and then went Rome. It wasn't very long until everyone was gone. But just like the cockroach, the cat came back the very next day. The cat came back, they thought he was a goner, but the cat came back, he just wouldn't stay away. I mentioned that song to him. That's one of my kids always wanted to hear when they were little.